Now, I said I would not return to this topic unless it was demanded of me. Well, I was in a discussion with an acquaintance friend of mine who brought a unique point of view towards me, saying, "Why not demand it of yourself?" To which I thought, yes, why not demand it of myself? Why not demand it of myself to continue visiting this topic until the fires of trashy destructum the show gets itself into? Unless it manages to find itself crawling out. But as of the latest episode, it literally has burst into flames. So, I'm to return. We're gonna bring back the appendices from Return of the King to take a look at certain characters, and we'll discuss the inaccuracies of the lores and how things could have been a little bit better or accurate or whatever you think. I mentioned in the past installment how I would have ideally laid out a 5-part season. There's 5 seasons to the Rings of Power, right? How you could have done this was, the first season could be titled The Rings of Power, and you could have had the two titles. A main title for the full series, right? And the secondary title for the season name, right? The series name should be called The Second Age, or Middle-earth, The Second Age, and then the subtitle being The Rings of Power, The War of the Elves and Sauron, The Rise of Pharazôn, or The Ambitions of Pharazôn, whatever you wanted to make for that middle arc. There's a lot to do here. And The Fall of Numenor, and of course The Last Alliance. That would be how you would title it, right? So let's do it one more time, just to give you the rundown. The Rings of Power, The War of the Elves and Sauron, The Ambitions of Pharazôn, The Fall of Numenor, and The Last Alliance. You could also call this one The Cunning of Sauron, or the manipulations, whatever. You could come up with a good title here, right? You could come up with a good title for how you start with Pharazôn and ending with him usurping the throne, right? That would be how that season ends, with him usurping the throne, marrying Miriel, all that stuff, right? That's how I would have done it. Now we're going to take a little bit more look into the appendices once more to find out... Oh, this is the Fellowship of the Ring. Where did I put... There it is. Here we go. I'm blind, apparently. I had all of them off to the side. I just threw the top one down. I thought I brought the Return of the King. I didn't actually look at it the entire time. Okay, so this one is Return of the King. I'm not cutting that out. That was amazing. Alright, let's go into the appendices, okay? Here we are in the appendices. Scroll all the way up to the front. Come on. Appendices A. Here we go. The Annals of Kings and Rulers. They have the rights to all of this. All of this. Now, granted, admittedly, there is not a lot from the second and the first and second ages in here that they could use, but there is enough to tell them about what happens in the third age, and what happens in the second age, and what happens in the first age, so as to not get things a little bit musty. Now, let's look through the lines of the Númenórean kings, because I mentioned that Telperion was around during the second age when the War of the Elves and Sauron happened. I want to see if her name is in here, so we're going to cut until I find it, and if I don't find it, we're going to cut until I move on to something else. Right here. It's right here. Telperion. Right here. The second queen. Okay? The first ruling queen is Tar-Ankel. Kalime, or I'm probably getting that name horribly wrong, but I'm reading it as Tar and Kalime. And then the second queen is Tar Telperion. Okay? The third queen is Tar Venimelde. Now, if I remember rightly, immediately, sometime around Tar Venimelede's era, her husband usurps power from her, right? And, because when she died, the power should have gone to, like, her next of kin, like the next descendant, instead of to the spouse. But no, the spouse took it over instead. That's what happens with Tar Venimelde, I believe. And then for Telperion, she was single. She was single. She didn't have a husband. She didn't have children. She had a nephew. The nephew is Tar Minister. It would be Minister who decides to go and help the elves during the War of the Elves and Sauron, right? And I actually found some more paragraphs that talk about the fall of Numenor here. Especially from here, this paragraph here, all across to the end of this page. It's not a lot. It's not a lot, but there's more chapters than I thought there would have. No, more paragraphs than I thought there would be for what they could have adapted, for what they could have used. Let's see here. Okay, so when Ar-Pharazôn usurped the throne, this is what it says here. When he died... No, let's start with the beginning of this chapter here. I just had a very dramatic whatever. Now I just messed up. The power and wealth of the Númenóreans nonetheless continued to increase, but their years lessened as the fear of death grew, and their joy departed. Tar Palantir attempted to amend the evil, but it was too late, and there was rebellion and strife in Númenor. When he died, his nephew, leader of the rebellion, seized the scepter and became King Ar-Pharazôn. Ar-Pharazôn the Golden was the proudest and most powerful of all the kings. Of all of them. All of them, it says. Minister, greater than him. Palantir, greater than him. And Dunakor, greater than him. Gimilzo, greater than him. Insiladun, greater than him. Minister, probably greater than him too. That's what it says. This man was supposed to be the mightiest and greatest of all of the greatest. Just because it says the mightiest and greatest does not mean the most heroic, the most kind, the most good. No. Ar-Pharazôn was pure dark, evil ambition, man. But that doesn't mean that he was a weak little politician vizier. No! He was a warrior with a lot of clout, with a lot of ambition, with a lot of pride, especially pride. He had so much pride, even, that he looked at Sauron the Great, and he was like, I'm gonna grab this guy by the throat and toss him out of his tower and claim his title for supremacy of Middle-earth. That's why he went to Middle-earth, just to knock him down, to take over. This man wanted to rule all of Middle-earth. He didn't want to just rule Númenor. He looked at Middle-earth and saw it as his. It was going to be his. He resolved to challenge Sauron the Great for the supremacy in Middle-earth, and at length he himself set sail with a great navy, and he landed at Umbar. So great was the might and splendor of the Númenóreans that Sauron's own servants deserted him, and Sauron humbled himself, doing homage and craving pardon. Then Ar-Pharazôn, in the folly of his pride, carried him back as a prisoner of Númenor. It was not long before he had bewitched the king, though, and he was a master of his counsel, and soon he had turned the hearts of all the Númenóreans, except the faithful, back towards the darkness. They were already on the path of darkness, except for the faithful. But Sauron lied to the king, declaring that everlasting life would be his who possessed the undying lands, and that the ban was imposed only to prevent the kings of men from surpassing the Valar. But the great kings take what is their right, he says. You see, this is all in there, right? Everything that I told you from Sauron lying and all that stuff. His fair form might not be mentioned here. The Lord of Gifts stuff that might not be mentioned in here. But a lot of the stuff that his disguised form did ended up in here, right? So here, this last page here is all about the fall of Numenor. It's all about the fall of Numenor. And, as of episode 6, Mount Doom erupts. If that is Mount Doom, Orodruin. Yes, Orodruin, right there. That's Mount Doom. It was called Amon Amarth, Mount Doom, right? Okay. So, it erupts in the Second Age, right? But it would erupt near the end, by the time of the last alliance here. Therefore, after a time, he made war upon the exiles, Arnor and Gondor. Before they should take root, Orodruin burst once more into flame, and was named anew in Gondor Amon Amarth, Mount Doom. But Sauron struck too soon. Before his own power was rebuilt, whereas the power of Gil-galad had increased in his absence, and the last alliance was made against him. Sauron was overthrown and the ring taken from him. So ended the Second Age. There's plenty of stuff here. With the 9 ships, the sealing of the Nimlock, the Seeing Stones, 7 of them Seeing Stones. They were on Numenor, so that's the show that shows the Palantiri and all that stuff. That's right. They found it there, Osgiliath and all that stuff. Minisithil, Minisanor, that's all there. Elendil was named High King because he was ruler of Adunias. Adunias, am I getting the name right? Now, Numenor is like a star. It's, let me grab my handy-dandy paper here. Numenor is shaped like a star. I'm absolutely butchering this, but I'm just gonna write a star-shaped thing. 5 points. Maybe it's 6 points of it, but whatever. Adunias is the west, the western part, right? This was what Elendil ruled. He ruled this little part. The capital or something, whatever, I believe was in the middle here, right? So, there, whatever. This part, I'm guessing only 1/5 of Numenor survives. Because, you know, these guys are all the king's men, I'm gathering. Yep, they were all the king's men running under Pharazôn. But I guess the people who served Elendil, they were all of the faithful. His kingdom was pretty nice. He had a fledgling, you know, because he's descended from the firstborn who was a daughter of the king. But at the time, queens could not rule Numenor, so Elendil's ancestor was not allowed to take the throne and instead became a fledgling ruler of a branch of Numenor instead, right? Okay, so that's what that's about. But they have the rights to all of this. They have the rights to Mount Doom erupting during the last alliance! It doesn't say it erupted at any time prior to this, okay? It didn't erupt at any time prior to this. Numenor was sunk before Mount Doom burst into flame. Now, it burst plenty of times during the First Age because it was made by Morgoth. It was made by that man. Yes, it was made by him. It was mentioned before. If it's mentioned before, I will admit it. Let's take a look. Now, I didn't find the first mention of Morgoth creating Mount Doom yet, but I found something else here that they're messing with a little bit. There were 3 unions of the Eldar and the Edain, Luthien and Beren, Idril and Tuor, and Arwen and Aragorn. We know about the third one because it's in the Lord of the Rings, it's in the books, it's in the TV show adaptation, the movie adaptation, film trilogy. The other 2 are not in the film adaptations, but they're mentioned in the books. They're mentioned in the books, and they're mentioned right here. Right here. They're right here. 3. He didn't say there could possibly be more. He just said there were 3. He didn't say there were 4. He didn't say there were 5. He didn't say that there could possibly be more. Just because he doesn't say something doesn't mean that you can wiggle yourself in there. Wiggle, wiggle, no. Just because he doesn't say it doesn't mean you can slip yourself in. Right? We don't. He's not around to ask anymore if you could wiggle yourself in there. He's not around to ask anymore. He's not around. That's sad. Now I'm gonna skip back to see if I can find the first mention of Orduin. Now the book's closing represents my failing to have found the first mention. Now, the first mention probably might be in a different part of the appendices, but as it stands here, there is no mention in the First Age era, from what I could briefly skim over, of there being the Mount Doom erupting in the First Age and all that stuff. But we know in rights that they don't have that. Let me skip to that. So, I did find that there was mention of Mordor during the Second Age. I did not find anything about its name in the First Age part, but that was very, very little. But Feanor's name is in here. Feanor's bringing the Noldor into Middle-earth is in there. Mention of the Silmarils is in here. Like, there's a lot of the whole, what's the word I'm looking for? The prelude, the prologue that you could mention here. Feanor's mentioned here as the greatest of the Eldar. Yeah, there you go. But he was also the proudest and most self-willed, right? So, there's also the crossing of Feanor. He left the Blessed Realm, the crossing the sea. The Dane, the Atani, were three peoples of men whom, coming from the west of Middle-earth and the shores of the Great Sea, became allies of the Eldar against the enemy, Morgoth, right? So I was right there too, right? Three clans of the Dane, right? These are the ones who went furthest west and befriended the elves, and there for their sufferings in the cause against Morgoth, the Valar granted the Edain a land to dwell, removed from the dangers of Middle-earth. They brought Numenor to them. They gave them to Numenor, right? They gave them Numenor, right? For though in the long span, here we go. Thence the Eldar came to the Edain and enriched them with knowledge and many gifts. But one command had been laid upon the Numenorians, the ban of the Valar. They were forbidden to sail west out of sight of their own shores, or to attempt to set foot on the Undying Lands. For though a long span of life had been granted to them, in the beginning thrice that of lesser men, they must remain mortal, since the Valar were not permitted to take from them the gift of men, or the doom of men, as it was there afterwards called. The gift of men was something that Eru did. So, the Valar, not even Manwë, who loved everybody, right? Manwë was like the big lover hippie guy, Valar, right? He, not even he could, like, say, I'm going to make the races of men immortal, because that was, like, Eru's thing, man. Eru was, like, the big high guy. The big one. The big one, the one above all of them, right? He was the one who said, alright, you humans, you're going to be mortals, and your souls are going to go out from this land when you die. That is the gift I give to mankind. And the elves, they would get Valinor, Aman, the Undying Lands. They would get to live forever in this world. Forever here until the end of the world, essentially, the end of time. Let me see if the map says here. No, there's no map. No map. Maybe there's a map at the middle. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. Whatever. Alright, so there's no map in this book. Maybe there isn't in another one, but basically, I could draw it. Hey, yeah, I could draw it with my terrible skill. So you got a circle here. You got the middle land right here, or whatever. You get the dark lands, or whatever. And then this part here, this is the Undying Lands. The Middle Earth is right here, right? And the Undying Lands is here. Middle Earth is roughly the size of Europe, right? And the furthest south, you could go if Beleriand was still around, say, or that much was Beleriand, or say, if you pointed here, right, and you pointed down to this part, and to put that on a European map or whatever, you could say that this would be the location of London, and down here could be Israel. That's about the length of the distance from the two ends. There's a lot that you could put in the part that we don't look at, because most of the story is set within that circle. The first age is set here, and some a bit in here for the leaders of the trees. But the first age is set here in Beleriand, right? And then the second and the third age, and the bulk of the fourth age, is all set here in Middle-earth, with Numenor being, like, right here. So if both of the bulk of the story is here, and most people in here are like the Germanic white European tribe people, Celtics and all that stuff, you could go further to the east, you go further down to the south, and logically you would encounter peoples who have passed for thousands of years, who are like born in some origin point, right? They were born in some major origin point, and they spread out. They would all spread out from across the world, and over thousands of years, let's say the people down here developed a dark skin tone. The people here developed like a Middle Eastern skin tone. The people over here developed like Eastern European or whatever. Like, you could do a lot there. That's the one thing with the whole diversity thing that I would have said, go wild with. But you have to confine it to the regions, right? You have to confine it to a logical region, because this is still both a medieval type of setting. You don't have planes to, like, immediately immigrate and travel all over the place. So the bulk of these people might not even be aware of each other. The people down here might not know anything that's going on up here, right? So they're pretty far removed. You're not going to have a lot of interaction until the interaction happens to them. Like, Harad does end up having stuff with Gondor. Gondor ends up having a lot of shit with Rune. Khan ends up joining the crap with Harad, right? But it takes time. There's a lot of distance. I believe it is in here, or maybe in one of the other books, that from coast here where the elves awoke, yeah, probably the Silmarillion, to the end of Beleriand is roughly 2,000 miles, 2,000 Earth miles, right? That's how big it is from coast to coast with Middle-earth, right? The elves woke up all the way here on the east, and they traveled all the way to the west to go to the Undying Lands. That's 2,000 miles by land. 2,000. Okay? Not to mention all the mountains and crap that's in the middle of it, so you have to wiggle around, so they probably went a lot more than 2,000 miles. Frodo traveled over 1,000 miles, and he didn't even go from coast to coast. He zigzagged through the mountains and all that crap, man. He went over 1,000 miles on foot. Took him over 100 days. This stuff takes time to do, man. And the show doesn't necessarily talk about time and the role of time in the actions of whatever. And let's say they show you Arondir's storyline in Mordor. I'm going to call it Mordor because I believe during the Second Age people would be calling it Mordor, since Mount Doom's frequent eruptions during the First Age probably gave it the name of Mordor, right? That's probably it. That's probably what would have happened. So they're in Mordor or whatever, and so they're in Mordor, and there's a storyline that happens surrounding Arondir and the Tavern Lady. I think her name is Bronwyn. I can't care to remember these people's names. They don't make good impressions on me. Tavern Lady is way too clean to be a member of this society, because everybody else is in rags. They're all dirty, they're all decrepit, and I would argue that if you're gonna have Tavern Lady look as nice as she does, you should at least have everybody else look as nice as she does. Just to make things look a little nice, just to make this settlement not look like a settlement of vagabonds with one person who bathes. You should have everybody bathe, because maybe this settlement is a pretty decent, well, long settlement that has been here for probably centuries. You know, the humans have been around for a while. They got around. There are humans all the way at the bottom of this friggin' continent. If I did a line, if I drew a line from here all the way to the top of this continent, it'd be more than 2,000 miles, because, you know, Middle Earth is longer than it is wide. It's 2,000 miles wide. It's probably 3,000 miles to 4,000 miles tall. They went all over the place, these humans, man. They went everywhere. And the people who went here probably have been here, as they have actually said they've been here since the first age. Man, these were the people that Morgoth got onto, man. Morgoth corrupted the races of the middlemen who did not cross the Misty Mountains. There were a bunch of middlemen who did not cross the Misty Mountains. There was a bunch of Sylvan Elves who did not cross the Misty Mountains. Our Arondir boy is a Sylvan Elf, and from what I can read here, the Sylvan Elves are descendants of the Nandor, right? They're descendants of the Nandor Elves. There's a lot of types of elves, and they're not in here, so they don't really have the rights to all those names. But for what it's worth, I'll just tell you, the Sylvan Elves are descended from the Nandor, right? And the Nandor were in part of the Teleri Elves. The Teleri Elves is the members of the elves that died in the first kinslaying in the Undying Lands, and is also the faction or group of elves of which Círdan, the shipwright, is from. They're big ship people, you know. So that's the Teleri, right? And they lingered, the Sylvan Elves lingered in the Vales of Anduin during the great journey west of the Eldar, right? The elves. They went west, the west, this way. You know, west is that way, so, you know, whatever. So they went this way towards the Undying Lands. From here, whatever, I'm not going to pronounce it. Kovanian, whatever. They went from here all the way to here, built boats, and went here, right? A bunch of elves stopped, however. Like, a bunch of elves just gave up the journey halfway. Some of them lingered here, some of them lingered here. Let me just write it. Let me just do another Middle Earth. That one's too messed up. Alright. And I woke up here. So they're traveling along here. They're traveling. Some of them may have stopped here. They're still traveling. Some of them may have stopped here. They're still traveling. Here are the mountains. And a bunch of them may have just stopped here. Some of them crossed the mountains. And a bunch of them, the Sindar Elves, ended up forming Doriath here in Beleriand. But then the rest of them went there. They built a bunch of ships. And they decided to go out here. Right? So all these circles here represent groups of elves that decided not to follow the rest who went over here, okay? There's a bunch of them. They all have a bunch of different names. Like the ones who stayed over here in the Far East, I believe they were called the Avari, the Unvowed, the Morikendi, whatever. And then there's these guys down here who are called the Sylvan Elves. And then, then there's this one, the Great Sindarin Realm of Beleriand, the Doriath. The Sindar Elves are what Legolas's father and his father's father are from. They're part. You know, Thranduil was born in Beleriand, right? And Elrond's ancestor goes all the way up to King Thingol, who ruled Doriath, right? There's a lot here. There's a lot of the Sindar Elves, right? And these guys came into Beleriand. Now, our Arondir fellow says he was born in Beleriand, right? In the show, he says he's from Beleriand, even though he says he's a Sylvan Elf. So, yeah. However, it says this here that on Tolkien Gateway that it is said that the western Avari, dwelling in Eriador, which, you know, in the Vales of Anduin. So Eriador and the Vales of Anduin. So maybe he's the part when in Eriador, right? The Avari, you know? So, the Nandor, the Avari, let's talk about the Avari. These guys are the refusers. That's just the people who decided not to go. Okay. But, it's still like, yeah, he'd probably be a Sindar, you know, Sindarin, man, you know. The Sylvan Sindarin, you know, Thranduil brought them all over to Ravanion, and it's just, I have to actually scour page after page after page after page of this stuff to try to find where they got their ideas from. Where do they get their ideas and trying to branch as far as they can. So these guys, the Cinder Kingdom, so what they're saying is, our boy was down here. Our boy was down here near the whatever, Eriador, right? Our boy was right there. So if he was born in Beleriand, he would remember the War of Wrath, and they talk about that crap and how they're watching the people in Mordor because they served Morgoth. So these guys are battle-hardened veterans, which makes you wonder why they got beat up so badly by these new orcs that are serving under Mori Candyman. I'm just gonna call him Mori Candyman. Mori Candyman Adar has a bunch of these orcs that are in white cloaks, probably of a form of symbology there, and they enslave our boy Arondir and his friends, and they're slaves in a camp for a while, for a couple days. It's an unknown amount of time, but for the sake of storytelling, because there's a lot that happens, there's a lot of traveling, a lot of time. The sound of paper you're hearing is me trying to rip off a piece of this right here. So there's a lot of time that goes on between from Mori Candyman and whatever. So we're gonna do a square here. This is before door, right? Mori Candyman and whatever. Here's Mount Doom, whatever. Mori Candyman or whatever. They're all probably around in the front half. They're probably in the front half. So they're right here. We're just gonna say they're right there. You could see Orodru in the distance. It should be smoking, but it's not. Everything's green. The green's supposed to be over here, but the humans are also supposed to be over here. But whatever. So they're here or whatever, and the Mori Candyman enslaves them for an unprecedented, unknown amount of time. Now we focus on the Earth here, the circle here. In the years of Numenor, right? Our girl Galadriel sails out of Lindon, and she stops. She stops and just starts swimming back. Gets picked up by a raft with Halbrandir, Halbrand, man. And then a boat from Numenor sails out, collects them up, and sails them back in, and they go here. So, during all of that time, our boy Arondir, who was born in Eriador, probably Eriador, they don't mention anything about Beleriand. They use Eriador, but Beleriand and Eriador, Beleriador. Whatever, I'm not going there again. Whatever, this is a... So, our boy Arondir, who is in Mordor, which is now called the Southlands, he's probably going to be enslaved for a very long amount of time. They're building trenches and all that stuff. Have them building long, lengthy trenches and all that stuff. He's probably enslaved for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. That's theoretically. This is all theoretically for things that to make sense. They have to make sense, but they don't apparently make sense in this show. But you have no idea how much time is passing. Nobody mentions time passing, but a lot of distance is supposed to have been crossed. Here are the Undying Lands. She stops just in front of the gates and swims back. And then she gets picked up there. Who knows how long that took, man? Now, if that line is basically like saying, somebody mentioned something, I can't remember the city names, but let's say you're going from London to Florence. Imagine if London, the distance between London and Florence was a big ocean, and you decided to take a boat there. It's just not like cruise liner the modern day. No, you're taking like a frigate from way back, the sailboat, right? You're taking that from Florence to Italy, from London to Florence, and the time it takes would probably be quite a few days. Give or take the wind and the weather permitting and all that other stuff. But it'll probably take a while. And then, let's say, right before you get into Florence, you jump off of your boat and decide to swim halfway back to London. And from there, you get picked up in a raft that left from, say, somewhere. Left from somewhere. And the raft left from there, and you get picked up, right? And then you're on a raft floating for who knows how long until you're picked up by Numenorians, and they're gonna take you back. It's like, that probably should have taken days and days and days. I could buy that elves have an untoldly amount of stamina, especially Years of the Trees age elves, because, you know, Galadriel was born during the Years of the Trees. She was born in Valinor, I think, in the Undying Lands. You know, these people are high elves. These people are big mogos, right? Feanor's over here, man. Feanor is a Years of the Trees elf, man. These guys are the greatest of the elves. Doriath elves pale in comparison to Valinor elves, right? So these guys come back over here. The Valinorian elves, man, the Noldor and all that stuff. These guys, one of them, named Fingolfin, has the brass balls to fight Morgoth himself. He loses, to his credit, but to his credit, he lasts for quite a while and gives Morgoth a wound that never healed. You know, this man, this elf, went toe-to-toe against an Ainur. This man, elf, you know? These guys are incredible. So I could theoretically buy that one of those elves from those types of people, Galadriel's of the Noldor, right? And I could buy that one of the Years of the Trees elves, like Galadriel, could have that untold amount of supernatural stamina that it would take to do what she did swimming in the waters, right? I could buy that, right? But I can't buy the lore and accuracies of whatever her character is and how quickly the show seems to make you think it happened. I could buy that she could swim for weeks and weeks without tiring. I could buy that, you know, I think Fëanor could have just jumped into the water and swam to Middle-earth, man. He was determined enough to do it. I think these guys have the talent to do it, but the show does not show you. It doesn't tell you time. Time is a problem in this show. It's a big problem. It's a very big problem. Let's say you have 3,000 years, if not more, in your timeline. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that timeline. Now let's say you got your showrunners here who decide to condense that into a couple little decades. So now you got all of that happening in that tiny little box. Everybody's got a zip, sop, and zoopity whopping all over. They're running all over this planet in the Middle Earth. I'm just gonna draw that little, and they're running all over the place in the span of decades. They gotta get everywhere quickly and all that crap because you've condensed the timeline. People have gotta breathe like rabbits because the timeline of the death tolls. A lot of people died right here in the War of the Elves and Sauron. A lot of people died, and it took time to breed them all back by the time of this part here. And then they gotta breed more for the big battle, man. It takes time. These things take time. Elves age to maturity in like 50 to 100 years, right? So for them, it especially takes a lot of time. But hey, they're not trying to adapt this. They're adapting this. They're doing that. They're doing this. I'm rambling. I was starting about our boy Arondir here, and I'm already talking about time. But that's what I'm saying. During the entire period of Arondir's enslavement in Mordor, during the entire time of his enslavement, he had to have been toiling and toiling for days and days and days and days and days to build all of these trenches for Morikendi Adarman to have his plan put into motion. Let's talk about that plan, because we finally learned what it is in this latest episode. This plan is to go into Mordor. You have Orodruin right here, and apparently it hasn't blown its cork for a long time, even though it's a bit, the land is called Mordor because it blows its cork a lot. Okay? It hasn't blown since Morgoth has been slain, though. So it's quiet. Everything's quiet. Everything's green over here, but everything is apparently green over here too. And we got our elven watchtower, which apparently it is lore friendly. It is lore friendly. We have elven watchtowers. The elves did come here to keep an eye on the land and all that crap. So we got an elven watchtower with Arondir, and Morikendi man is somewhere around here. So Arondir goes out to investigate something in the village, and he gets, let's say the village is right here, the Southlander people in Mordor. The villages are all scattered all over the place, and he goes to one of them because Tavern Lady is his thing on the side. So Tavern Lady and our boy Arondir are doing a thing, and then Arondir goes off to do a thing, and he gets captured by white-hooded orcs. These white-hooded orcs take him to Morikendi man, and Morikendi man says, "You need to build me some trenches, man." And he's already captured the rest of the elves of the tower. Apparently, only a couple elves are down here. They wouldn't bring out a whole garrison of 50 to 100 to a couple thousand and have a whole big settlement around here with the ruins and all that stuff. Apparently, they wouldn't do that. No, they'd just bring about 5 or 6 of y'all. That'll be fine. It'll be fine. 5 or 6 of you against hundreds, potentially thousands of humans out here. If they ever decided to go against you, the 5 of you will be fine, right? So they're all here, and Morikendi man says, "Build me some trenches." So while Galadriel's doing her Olympic swimming, Morikendi man has him building all the trenches from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, underground into there, right? So that's where Morikendi. Then apparently there's some underground reservoir or whatever here, and apparently these guys have had enough time for the MacGuffin key, the sword hilt key or whatever. I'm just gonna draw whatever. Apparently the sword hilt key here is the sword, whatever, that when somebody drips blood or whatever onto the sword, it grows or whatever. This thing goes into a MacGuffin hole somewhere in a ruin or whatever, and you turn the key, you turn the sword or whatever, you turn it, and it unlocks a reservoir of water, a big reservoir of water somewhere that the people had to have had a lot of time to put that water there. They had to get that water from somewhere. They had to put it in here. There might be a river. Is there a river in Mordor? Let's take a look. Yes, there is some water in Mordor. It's going to take some time, but there's a pretty detailed little thing going on here. We're going to keep that visible so you can see that. Let's find another thing for me to scribble on. Please, let's find a little thing here to scribble on. So, let's just show off all these, though, so you can see all the mess that's going on. And you can see the mess. That's while she's doing her Olympic swimming, our boy Arondir in Mordor, Southlands, Southdor, is building trenches. And the actual detailed map that I got here, we're still gonna do that, right? We're still gonna do that. Well, there's a thing called Udun, this little land right up in here. Udun, that's the name of the episode too. Udun and all that stuff. There's the opening right there, right? And there's some mountains. Mountains right here, right? There's some mountains right there. And then we go down into the another base, and there's some more mountains. More mountains right here. Some more mountains. More mountains right here, right? Mount Doom is right here. Mount Doom is right there. After that, in this little secondary square. And then outside of here, there's some rivers. It's green. It's pretty green outside of this little area, right? This whole area is where it erupts a lot. So this is where it's going to be dead. This should be a dead lands. But out here, it's pretty green, right? It's pretty green out here. Out here, there's a lot of lakes. There's a lot of rivers. They meet up. They go that way. And there's a big sea called the Sea of Noonan. So there you go. There's water right here. It's way out here. So theoretically then, what they would have to do is get this is probably the water that they're likely using. This is probably the water they're likely using. So so maybe these villages are all scattered out here. Logically, I would say that they're scattered out here. I would say so. I would think so. So our boy Arondir and Mori Candyman are building trenches from the water here. The reservoir, the water, they probably built reservoirs to gather the water from the Nernan Sea, you know, into the other villages, you know, because water is important. You'd probably have a bunch of settlements here. Logically, you would have settlements by the water. You would have settlements by the water, right? You would logically do that. Instead of bringing the water to you, you'd go to the water. It's a lot easier to go to the water. So they're building trenches. They're building trenches for Mori Candyman. They're probably doing a bunch of stuff for Mori Candyman, bringing it all the way here to the mountain. So the key, our key here, you turn it in some elven watchtower. They probably built them around here, you know. You'd think they'd build a couple around here. Maybe they're building some out here, you know, whatever. So in one of the watchtowers, there's apparently a statue right behind our boy Arondir while he's talking about the key. There's a statue right behind him in the elven watchtower, and there's a statue of this sword key, right, and something that looks like Sword God or Sauron or whatever. And then he talks about the MacGuffin because it's very convenient. It's very, very convenient. He talks about its key for something and whatever, the evil key. So they turn the key in the next episode. The creepy dude from the first or second episode with the Arondir man. The creepy white dude, of course. The creepy white dude turns the key, and the water, I'm guessing, from Nernan goes through all the trenches that Mori Candyman made the elves make, and these are probably human slaves. They all throw all the water through the trenches here into Mount Doom, because it's way over here, man. Mount Doom is way over here. Now, this may look like there's not a lot of land here. This may look like there's not a lot here. Now, this is very, very estimatey, very length estimates, but this length from this corner to this line is roughly 90 miles. Roughly 90 miles, right? Which means that's another 90 miles, that's another 90 miles, that's another 90 miles. So they had to go more than 90 miles of trenches. They had to build more than 90 miles of trenches to get all of this water from the Sea of Nernan, which is the only logical body of water they would get it from, and bring it to Mount Doom, all the way over here, because of the key in an elven watchtower statue. Are you seeing, is it starting to make sense? These scribbles that look like they don't make sense because I am being incredibly inept at drawing them. It's actually the details for the show. It's actually... That's what's going on! This is a rambling video, and I'm probably going to come back to this in a part 4 where I'm probably going to try to be a little bit more organized. I'm stopping this at 50 minutes, by the way. More be 51, whatever. But in a part 4, I'm going to come back to this nightmarish little hellscape that you see here. In this little nightmarish hellscape, we are going to come back. But we're not going to talk about this. But that's what happens in this episode. The evil white dude turns the water key, port key, water key, evil key, and brings the water from the water source here. Theoretically, that's where they do it, but they probably didn't do it like that. That'd be too unrealistic, and that would take too much time to do that. And they'd probably say we'd have hundreds of years to do that. But no, we have only a couple weeks. So maybe they're going to say that there's an invisible, unknown body of water here, right? And they're only going to do a couple miles, trenches. That's probably what happens. But before I leave you, this is probably going to be 55 minutes. I forgot about this. I have to talk about this. Before I leave you, we're going to talk about Mori Kendi Man. Mori Kendi Man. I thought he would be a Mori Kendi Man. I thought he would, Ben, and most of the Mori Kendi were corrupted by Morgoth into the first orcs, right? And that's one of the main things that the Tolkien said with the stories and all, how Morgoth could not create things. He could only corrupt that which was already here. He could sow discord into creation, but he could not create. He did not create the orcs. He corrupted the elves into the orcs. The elven lifespan diminished and turned into something twisted and foul. They died after maybe a century or so. They had shortened mortal lifespans. They were corrupted beyond all measure of noticement and whatnot. And Mori Kendi Man apparently is one of the first ones that Morgoth corrupted, apparently. But in this case, they are using Sauron, because Mori Kendi Man apparently killed his boss. That's right, folks. Mori Kendi Man is leading a workers' rebellion. A workers' rebellion. Good on you, Mori Kendi Man. Adar Mori Kendi Man is leading a workers' rebellion of the orcs that he believed deserve rights. These orcs deserve workers' rights. He built this workers' union to show the elves, to show the humans, to show Sauron that this workers' rebellion deserves to be noticed. The orcs shall have rights. They'll be able to have an established work week of 40 hours. These orcs will have job security. They'll be able to take days off. Oh, God. And that's your show, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Rings of Power. I can't wait to come back for part 4. I'm coming back to this.